Ladies and listeners, women and wonders, boys and beauties, and all you marvelous male marvels listening in today. I'm excited as all, can I say hell? I think I can say hell, to be joined by Carolyn Boldt. Carolyn, thanks for being on the show today. I am elated to have you on.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So today we're going to explore something that I think does not get enough attention in the universe space of aesthetics, which is odd because it's maybe the most important aspect of the aesthetic realm to consider, which is your space. We spend so much time talking products, devices, strategy, marketing execution. How do we select the right vendor? How do we do due diligence? How do we do this, that, and the other? But we don't put enough attention on our space. So today's topic or theme is going to be deeply rooted in that. And I don't know if there's anyone better in the industry to be teaching us about this than Carolyn today. So Carolyn, where should we start? There's so many different facets we could explore, but where should we start as we explore the relationship between the quality of your space, the intentionality of how you architect it, and the effect that will have ultimately on your maximizing your potential of your spa, of your chiropractic clinic, aesthetics shop, lash studio, whatever? Where should we start? Where should we start?
Well, we can start first to let everyone know that this is very purposefully intentional to make you be aware that your space does impact your success. And the reason we got started in this whole business was to help elevate the professions so that they understood that. And especially the small business owner doesn't always take that into account. And that's where we're focused. And that's where our goal is to help you understand that your space can yield an incredible return on investment, or it can really be detrimental to your success if you don't do it correctly.
Yeah. So maybe I'm thinking, as far as a starting point goes, maybe we can speak to why we should care about our space.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people, they're so bombarded by the distractions of the daily, managing their staff, trying to find staff, especially if you're a massage therapy center and you're struggling to find therapists, or your whatever vertical you're in within beauty. There's 1,000 things that detract and distract our attention from the immediate present, which is our space. Why should we care, I guess, with the, or why should we care to concern ourselves with the exploration of how our space affects us?
Well, let's start there. Your space affects you. Your space, the environment that you're in, impacts your behavior. It impacts your decision making. It impacts your patients and your clients' decision making about you. So why don't we just start with a patient or a client walks into your office and they make a first impression. That first impression will never be able to be reworked. It is the first impression, and it's very much focused on the environment that they walk into. And if that environment is not congruent with who you are and what you're trying to have your message about, then you're going to be fighting uphill the whole way. So the question we would ask is your space working for you or against you? And if it's working for you, then it's going to help excel you to your success and to the success of those patients and clients. Does that make sense? And I can keep going.
Please do. No, please do. I'm scribbling notes here. If well, the listeners can't see this, but I'm taking notes here because there's some different avenues that I think we should explore as you're speaking. So if you see me caption that, that's what's happening. But yeah, please do continue. I'd love to hear more.
Okay, so let's just start with the fact that your space impacts your environment, or your environment impacts your behavior. So let's think, when we design offices, when we design spas, et cetera, what the first thing we take into consideration is the theories of retail design. So retail design creates environments that people want to buy what you're offering. So if you think about the different stores that you would go into, each one of them is purposely designed so that what you're expecting to buy and experience in that store is congruent with that. So we can go from one extreme to another, and with no criticism or no judgment of any stores, we can talk about how you feel, act, and think when you're in a Walmart, how you think, feel, and act when you're in Neiman Marcus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so let's take two sides of the spectrum. So Walmart is very, very purposely designed that way. And I can go into the deep design details for you, such as the really bright lights, the really hard surfaces, lots and lots of signage, a lot of that. You walk in totally congruent with expecting their message as the low price leader. You don't see any frills. You don't see anything fancy. You usually don't see anyone to help you. You kind of live with the fact that you're going to go find it yourself. You're on a mission to hunt. Do you follow me? All of that is elevated by the fact that the space is congruent with that. And most people don't even think about it, but most people don't even care about what they wear when they go into a Walmart. You know, it's just, they're going there for a deal. They're going there because of the low price leader. So that branding of low price leader is congruent all the way through everything they do, including the space. Then let's move over to a high class, high designer store. And you walk in, Giorgio Armani. I'm just going to use that as an example. And you walk in, you don't see price tags anywhere. In fact, you're probably don't even want to ask. You get a lot of service. You do care about what you wear. The lighting is a certain coloring. The color around the space is more, tends to lend itself to those people that would be more affluent, cash focused type base versus we're back in Walmart, bright colors. So there's a difference. There's psychology of all of those things that the interior designer brings to the realm. And what's sad is that most people don't even realize it. They just don't even realize. So that's what we're here to explore. We're here to get the message out that your space does impact your success and you can be intentional about it.
So it's something like you either, if we're talking intention here,
okay,
you either architect your space or your space will architect you.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about the different elements here. And I think most people are privy to the notion of landscaping. Maybe you want to put up some curbing around your lawn, or you want to put a stone garden in, or whatever, different bushes and shrubbery and whatever, gardens and that kind of thing. But we don't ever think, it seems like, and I'm assuming these are elements of design, are things like you mentioned with Neiman Marcus versus Walmart. So the visual scaping. So thinking lights and how your lighting will affect you. And I can imagine if you have fluorescent lights beaming down upon your retinas, you're going to feel like, oh my God, I'm in an FBI interrogation. Whereas if you have some sort of exotic, soft, warm lights, I don't know the frequencies or whatever, but a soft or warm light that is indirect, then maybe casts a sort of, I don't know if alpenglow is the right term, behind some sort of statue or tree like you see in the background here or something like that, that'll have a different affect on people's psychology. Absolutely. Audioscaping. So maybe I'll spitball these different varieties of scaping and then escaping, and then we can rip off of that based on your input. But I'm thinking there's something to be said about visual scaping, audioscaping, perhaps even kinetic and tactile scaping. So the things that you touch, you feel, you smell, and also position scaping with respect to the movement of traffic inside of that. So here's an example that comes to mind. Have you heard of, so there's a show called Bar Rescue by John Taffer, and he's responsible for this coin, or this term that he coined called the butt funnel, which sounds very bizarre. What the hell is a butt funnel? Have you heard of this? Is this something you've come across?
I think so. Keep going. I hadn't heard what you just said, but keep going.
So one of the ways that this guy was able to turn around a lot of these failing bars was by reshaping the direction of traffic, such that at the somewhere near the bathroom or the dance floor or something, you would have a tightened space to where when two people walk past each other, a guy and a girl, for example, and they would turn to like, shimmy through that space, their butts would touch, and that has some sort of pheromone, something or other. I don't know what the hell the effect is, but it would create this draw to the space, the people in there, and it would magnetize them and bring them back for repeat business. And literally the butt funnel is one of the things with the architecture of the space that would lead to the bar being rescued, hence the name of the show. And this is a John Taffer idea. So there's, I mean, effectively there's a different architecture that's required for each of the senses. Is that a fair assessment? How do we even think about that? Where do we start? Because we have, we don't just have 5 senses. We have proprioception and all these other senses as well. Right. How do we chip away at this when, we're looking at a block of marble. We're trying to chisel away to get our Michelangelo, which is our space.
Right.
How do we even think about starting? It seems overwhelming when you begin to think deeply about it.
Okay. So what we start with is we call form follows function. So a lot of what we're talking about is that we end with the form, which is the 3-dimensional design of the space, but you start with the function of the space. Now, when I talk about function, some of what you just talked about was how do we get people to flow through the space? And how does that work? And how does that interact with each other? Let me go to the other extreme. Just how many square feet do I need? How big do my rooms need to be? Some of those things are the foundation. And then how those parts and pieces need to flow together. That's what we call space planning in the built industry. And how they flow together. When we think of flow, you're talking about that where in the restaurant where they purposely wanted people to touch because of that, what's happening in that bar and what they want to happen in that bar is almost the opposite when we're talking about personal spaces for clients and patients and stuff. They need a little bit more autonomy, and they need to be a little bit more quiet and not community sense in a lot of sign. I say that, I mean, we work with chiropractors that have gyms inside their space too, and they want that different community. So the purpose that I'm talking about is that the first function we have to decide is what has to function in the space. What are we offering? And then secondly, how do you want people to function in that space? So you got to very purposefully know that. What culture do you want to have? What type of expectancies and things of that. So there's not really a science to it. It's very esoterical. It's very artistic, but as much science as I can get to it would be how many square feet we need, how big they need to be, and how much kind of flow we've got to go through the space. So that's the function. The function of the space has to happen first. And once you get really clear about the function of that space, then you could start to put basically layers of aesthetics on top of it. And you're absolutely right. 99% of it is your first impression is visual. Yeah. But you do take in everything else. You take in the smells, you take in the sounds, you take in the light as part of your visual, but you take all of that in, and all of that can be very purposeful.
I wonder if it would be helpful for the listeners as we think about how do we shape up and sculpt or scape our space. Now that's just a bit of a desperate alliteration. I couldn't resist the urge. That maybe, and tell me if this is how you would approach it. So let's say I'm convinced, okay, I need to think about my space. Maybe my space is a bit too pedestrian. It's just too meh. Perhaps the starting point, if you've convinced someone that they need to attend to their space, is in terms of a heuristic, it'd be something like, I need to optimize for the emotional state I want to put my customers in. Something like that. Is that a fair starting point in terms of how we would think about even where to begin with this? Because this is dense. This is deep.
It's deep. Well, so So the starting, I am going to go back to the starting point is the function.
Okay.
But what you just described is a piece of that decision of the function. So
Yeah.
How do you want people to act in your space? How do you want people to feel in your space? There are elements of design and there's principles of design that the designer uses. We could kind of go there if you want, but each one of the principles of design can be used and have to be considered in a well-designed space. So let me just throw out some ideas. Let me just throw out.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay? Let's just say that someone wants, so when we start with a client, we start with what is your image? What is your branding? What are you trying to do? So we're starting there. So all of those, what's your mission statement? What are you trying to accomplish? Even though that's very emotional and then it extends over into marketing, because the way your marketing is expressed has to do with that. All of those statements, all of those words, all of those things are taken into consideration by a designer that designs your space. How that's done is we use different, like I said, these different principles. So for example, we have a principle of balance. So every space has some type of balance, meaning that when you walk into the space, you don't want people to feel lopsided or sideways or things of that sort. That's it's more of an emotional feeling than it is an actual feeling. So it's not true things are equal on each side for the most part. It's just that they feel equal on each side. That's balance. So when you say somebody wants a space that really projects authority. They're going to go into a place that they want people to know that there's maybe some more medical stuff going on. There's more decision making that has to be done, and they want people to trust them. So we would use typically what we call symmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance would be what you would see on classical design, like it's the White House and things of that sort, where everything is equal on each side. That automatically creates authority. Okay. Let's just say you want to create an environment that is very comforting and friendly and warm, and what you want people to feel like they're walking into their home. You would use asymmetrical balance. So asymmetrical balance would be, imagine a large white sofa balanced by a small blue chair. There's a sense of balance, but it's not equal on each side. So people, their guard is down and they feel more comfortable. So that's just an example. Or there's a whole nother balance called radial balance, which is circular. Okay. And it's balanced in a circle, and that creates a sense of community. So using these elements of design, and balance only being one of them, the designer can give it's all emotional. It's all psychological. Yeah. It's a psychological aspect that goes into it. Does that help?
Yeah, well, it just brings up more questions, which is exactly what I'm excited to explore with you.
Let me throw another one at you.
Yeah, please do.
Another element is line. So line is an element of design, and it's part of I don't want to go all into all the details of it, but if you have something that you want people to be quiet and settled, you would have horizontal lines. If you want people to stand up and be more at attention, you use more vertical lines. That's the psychology. Yeah.
Are you talking like on your walls, or in what context do these lines emerge?
However you can use them. So yes, it could be on your walls. It could be wall covering on your wall that's very vertical versus very horizontal. That's how subtle it is. It can be the height of rooms. The taller the room is, the more people want to stand up. That kind of goes into scale. So there's a bunch of things like that. The quieter and more intimate, the lower the light level. Light's another thing. I think we kind of touched on that a little bit, but the brighter the light, the more energy there is. The lower the light, the lower the energy. The more varied the light, the more interesting the space is. The more overall wash of light there is, the more, I'm just going to use the word uninteresting for lack of better words at this point.
Wow.
So all of the elements.
That is wild.
So you start with, what is your goal? What is your goal? What is your goal that you are trying to, what is the message of who you are? What is the message of your practice? What is the message of your business trying to be? And then the elements that you use in the design, you choose them to support that. Color is another one. Color is another big one. Yeah, we can talk about color. There's a huge psychology just around color all by itself. Color in the space, in the environmental space is one thing, but color is, there's perceptions and where they come from, they're learned. I mean, nobody can really tell us exactly where your perceptions come from. That 99% of them are learned, right? Light is more inherent to your human being, but color is pretty learned. But in the learning of color, certain colors feel and draw certain emotions. There's even ancient color therapy, where color was used in different types of therapy treatments. And so
I'm looking at a color wheel color psychology wheel as we speak here.
Okay.
And yeah, you're exactly right. So there's some sort of emotional response that is, I'm guessing, evoked by way of the colors that you interact with, where, for example, red will generally produce this feeling of energy, courage, strength, victory, etc.
Yes.
Whereas blue is trust.
Yes.
Green is awakening and renewal. This is all very interesting. So it's almost as if geometry, mathematics, and everything contained in the bounds of the set of sets that represents
the built environment.
Yeah. Which I guess it's mathematical in nature, because the structure of the universe is mathematics. You could say, like, the Fibonacci sequences, golden ratio, whatever. Like, these phenomena emerge everywhere, and they evoke some sort of psychological response. And if we think deeply about it, we can then, I mean, it seems so clearly that we can affect the outcomes and the practice from the way the lines in the space, the way we've arranged our furniture, the color of the lighting that we have, the way we set the lighting, etc., will all affect really two things: the effect it has on us,
yes,
and the effect it has on the shaping of the movements and the emotions of our customers. Wow.
yes.
This is an infinitely deep topic, it seems like. I'm almost overwhelmed even trying to understand where to
go with that. Well, you don't have to know it all. So just to support what you were just saying, when we look at design, we look at retail design, and then we also look at hospitality design. So we've been talking about retail design. Retail design is really focused on that first impression, that image, that branding, the package of your practice, the package of your office, if you would say it that way. If you think about when you go into a store, and you look at all the packages on the shelf, what you're looking for, you are drawn psychologically to different products because of their packaging. And you begin to learn different things. And then I can go off into packaging all day long, but the packaging is what you're, it's just like the branding on your website, just like your logo, a lot of those things. It's that first impression. So anyway, we're talking about the environment, the built environment. Retail design is the first impression. When you were talking about movement through the space and lighting, and especially to get back into the space, what we bring into it is hospitality design. So you were talking about that in the restaurant. Hospitality design is how people how you create a culture in the environment. And that has a lot to do with the design elements also, but it's the same design elements, it's just deeper into the space as opposed to your first impression of the space. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Wow. I'm perplexed by the fact that literally everything in our environment, in some sense, shapes us. And I'm starting to think as well about the architecture of a, well, this is going to get off the rails, but I'm thinking about skylines of cityscapes even, and some sort of correlation between the height of the building and the impact that that industry has on society. Whereas, for example, in Manhattan, the tallest skyscrapers on the skyline are financial buildings. Whereas 100 years ago, perhaps, or 500 years ago, was the church, which was the leading influencer on the planet.
Wow, that's profound to say. Yeah.
Think about that, right? So this is just I do get stumped frequently, but this is a stumping topic because there's so many damn directions that we could take this and things to explore. It's frankly, it's an ocean. It's overwhelming. Maybe we could do this because I want to give the listeners, I think, two things as takeaways. Number one is to invigorate them in their thinking, or rather in their creating space to consider the fact that this is important.
Yes.
Very important, deeply important. And frankly, it's probably out of your domain of expertise, listeners, to where you might actually need to call someone who is an expert in color psychology, placements of pieces in your space, lighting, furniture, et cetera, to achieve the multifold project that you should be considering of having congruency between your branding and the feeling that you evoke when you have your customers walk through, the state of your own psychology and the management of it, so that you can best optimize your own performance, et cetera, and all these other bits. But maybe what we could do beyond that in reinvigorating people's considerations for the topic categorically is give them something actionable as they approach this behemoth of a subject on maybe like a where to start. So, and we've already somewhat alluded to this, but when it comes to design, if someone's looking to have someone do it for them, okay, the answer is simple: call Carolyn. Boom. If they want to try and likely fail, as I have done, I'm like psychoanalyzing my own space as we're talking here. Are my lines set up correctly? Are they horizontal when they should be vertical? But if the listener wants to do a DIY and attempt to re-architect their own space, and we have some big ideas to share with them, where could we point them? How can we get them started, at least topically? Are there things like, hey, maybe furniture is the most important thing to start with, or maybe it's lighting?
Okay, so let me speak to two different potential in your audience out there. Okay. You'll have the audience that already has an existing space. And then obviously there will be the audience that's looking to open and move into a new space, right? Okay, so let's just talk about the audience with an existing space. So we actually created, in fact, I'm gonna give you the link for our listeners. We actually created this 5-step designer checklist. And we actually, and we created it because we kept telling people this and was like, we need to write this down so that we can just give it to them. And so let me see if I can walk you through what we tell people. Basically, if you have an existing space, you need to back up and analyze, is it where you need it to be? You need to pay attention to it. That's what this whole goal of this podcast is. Pay attention, be aware, have an awareness of it. So step number 1 is we tell people, don't you look at the space, bring someone else in and get their opinion. Just like, I hate to say it, but just like when you get dressed, sometimes you need another person's opinion. Does this look good on me? Does this, that's why the salesperson in the store, you hope that they're telling you what they need to. With that being said, having another set of eyes, because a lot of times people are so close to it, they can't see it.
Yeah.
So that's number 1. Well, and when you do that with this person, the very first thing you want to do is it clean? It's amazing to me how that's not always the first thing that people think about. Is it clean? Is it cluttered? Is it worn out? Is it dated? Those are the big things that people aren't necessarily aware of. Okay. So once you get past that, then you start to look at, because if any of those things are happening, it's already speaking that you're not professional, you're not up to your game, you're not, what is it speaking to people? So that's the goal. It's like, what is your space saying about you? And if you're not happy with it in some form or fashion, why are you unhappy with it? Is it not respecting who you are? Is that making sense that I'm saying? Then the other thing is, so are things worn out? Are things dated? Is the lighting raunchy? You know, when I say raunchy, is it, we were just talking earlier, is it just a blast of fluorescent light everywhere? Does it have some variation to it? Does it have some interest to it? And then, you know, those are, I'm thinking, have I done all of them? Let's see, is it clean? Is it cluttered? Does it have a date? Is it dated? Is it worn out? What's the lighting? That's pretty much the big ones, the really big ones. If any of those things are happening, especially if it's dated, so things, whether we like it or not, things are going to date every 7 to 10 years. That's just the way it is. There is no, hey, I designed it 20 years ago and it's going to stay this way forever. It's going to date. It may date purposely, but it's going to date. And that's a whole nother story. But most people aren't designing a very super traditional space that's the only things that don't date a lot. Does that make sense what I'm saying? But most things are going to date, especially if you're projecting yourself as cutting edge. You're probably going to have more things you want to do in the space that are more trendy, I would say, and those are going to date a little bit faster. So is that helping what I'm saying at all?
It does. It does.
Okay. And then as you think about that, I don't know how to teach somebody design techniques that I was just telling you earlier, but if you're interested, you can go on courses all day long on just the generalities of what we were talking about with space, textures, color, lighting, all of those type of things. Does that help? Like the do-it-yourself type mentality?
Yeah. It's probably also important to play, or stating it differently, experiment. For example, if you're going into Nordstrom and you're like, I would never wear that. How about put it on? Try it. Maybe you'll hate it. Maybe you'll love it. And notice the emotion that it evokes from you. And then consider whether or not that squares with your brand adjective, if you do have that.
So I'm glad you said that, because what we would tell somebody that came to us, and maybe this is the do-it-yourself, is we would start with, you have words of who you want to be to your patients and to your clients. But find pictures of spaces that represent that emotion to you personally. So I'm using an example. I mean, we get the word all the time. I want to be professional. What does professional mean to you? What does professional mean to, Joe Blow over here? It's a word that doesn't really have an absolute in its vision, if you follow what I'm saying. It's very subjective. So your space has some subjectivity to what you want it to express. So what you want those spaces to be. So you said that trying things on, you don't want to spend the money and the energy repainting your walls 1,700 times. You want to actually observe whether that's walking through spaces, or whether that's finding pictures of spaces that evoke the emotion that you're looking for. Once you're aware that spaces evoke emotion, you'll never be able to walk through a space again without being aware that it evokes an emotion. Does that make sense, what I just said? You're forever changed now once you realize that.
I don't think people realize how clay-like they are in their plumbing, so to speak, in that I'm desperately avoiding trying to get philosophical, which is my background in having studied philosophy. But if we are merely conduits of sensory perception, we're just bundles of sensory receptors that take in, God, what is something like 7 million bits of data per moment, whatever that unit of time is. We're only able to synthesize or process some 40 bits of it. And the first figure is irrelevant. It's a huge figure versus a tiny figure, basically.
Right.
And what we allow into our, let's call it our processing engine of our cognitive wetware, let's say, and equally with the customers that we bring in, it is going to produce an impact. I mean, to me, I can't even imagine doing this myself, frankly, as I'm thinking about the complexity of this, because in just the same way that I've heard it said that the clothes make the man or the person, whatever, your space will create you. And I'm also thinking about I think I shared this when we spoke prior, the story of Dr. Cialdini in writing his book, Persuasion, which is a great book if you're interested in learning how to sell, which listeners, turns out everything in life is selling. Everything. Everything. Sorry, it's called human interaction and interfacing. Everything is this sort of sales exchange of some capacity. But he's one of the fathers of persuasion studies, let's say, him and Dr. Knowles, at least to my knowledge. And he, in writing the book Persuasion, listeners, when he was in his academic setting on campus, as he was writing the piece that became Persuasion, he noticed his writing was very drab and just highbrow and pedestrian and blah when he was in the university in his office. But when he went to the coffee shop where it was bustling, there's a lot of life and energy, his writing suddenly became, and this is unconscious, his writing became more lively and zesty and full of energy and fun. It's like, wow. So your space will shape you if you don't intentionally shape it. So
very
wild.
well said. Yes, very well said.
It's almost like we have no free will. We're just the result of our environment. No, it can't be so. Is there also some sort of, when we think of intentionality, is there something to be said about, for example, like a vision board, which maybe this is like back office type stuff, but I'm thinking of the role of the reticular activating system, which we can feel that part of the brain's effect on us when let's say you're looking at buying a Tesla, and before you're looking at buying a Tesla, you never see a Tesla on the streets ever. But suddenly, it seems, after you start doing research on Tesla, it seems like you can't turn your neck without seeing a new Tesla. They're everywhere, when in reality, they haven't changed the frequency of your seeing them. You just started to notice them. And if success is the product of the allocation of that of which you focus on, or the intentional selecting that of which you do choose to focus on, I can see there being some sort of role in the environment and how you've shaped it up such that you're focusing on, maybe you want to be a more confident spa owner. So maybe you need to have red on the walls or something. If the color psychology of the color red suggests that lends to feeling confident. It's like, God, this gets so deep. It's baffling.
Okay. So two things. One, what you just said about the Tesla is that is the spa owner. That is the business owner's job. Mm-hmm. The business owner's job in this design of this space is to have the space represent what they want the focus to be. Okay. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say? To the patient that comes in, or the client, or potential, because you're right, it's all about selling. You have to get into the psychology of what do they want. Do you follow me? What do they want? What are they looking for? What's their psychographics? What's their, we already know the demographics, but what are they thinking? What are they processing? What are they hoping to achieve? And that's where you want to design to. Does that make sense? That's where you want to, because just like the reticular activating mechanism, when they walk into the space, if you've worked through that, they've already been thinking about this. They've already been, this isn't a brand new idea to them. They are seeking you out in some way because they have a problem they've been trying to solve. Mm-hmm. And your company, your business, your practice, your store, whatever it is you're trying to attract those people that are trying to solve that problem. You have the solution for that problem. So that's where the whole process of the design happens in you're purposeful and it catches their reticular activating mechanism. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
What I'm saying?
100%. Yeah, because I'm thinking about, so I'm a member of Hand and Stone Massage, where I get massages every, I don't know, a couple weeks or so. One of our clients, actually.
Okay.
And what's interesting is, if I'm not being intentional about how I am operating and behaving myself, I will notice that I almost fall victim's the wrong term here. What's a different way to say it? Victim is way the wrong term, because it's nice, actually, frankly. But when I walk in, here's what I notice. When I walk in, I'm usually a fairly high energy guy, where I'm
really.
One of my best friends has described me as being obstreperous, which is loud, noisy, and difficult to control, which I think is apt and fitting. But in any case, when I walk into Hand and Stone, I've noticed that as a result of their playing this very, feng shui is the wrong term, like Zen-like mellow music.
Mm-hmm.
The front desk girl is like, "Hi, how are you?" I just suddenly start to melt away, and I start noticing that I'm moving slower. I'm dropping the sound of my voice, where I'm being a bit more sonorous, and my energy it's not like it's robbed of me. It's like I'm involuntarily being shaped by that space when I walk into it. Whereas if I walk into a dance club, it's immediately, and I'm like high speed, high energy. I'm throwing drinks at people. Just kidding. And it's out of my control almost, unless I try to intentionally control my actions and my, even what I'm thinking about. It's absolutely baffling. So maybe this is something that would be helpful for the listeners as well, as they think about their own design. Because if you're not convinced at this point, listeners, I don't know what to tell you. Because to me, this is the most vital piece of the customer experience. This affects reviews, everything. I'm thinking that perhaps the way to start on their odyssey of reshaping their environment is, you have to begin with the end in mind. And what does that mean? It means you're asking the question, what do I want them to feel? And I think you said on the function follows form bit that it's also, how do you want them to move and act? Is that the right starting point in starting with the end in mind? Okay.
Definitely. You start with the end. Form follows function, meaning that what is the purpose of this space? Function is, what is this? How is this to perform? How is this to, what are my goals in that situation? So absolutely. Absolutely. And you're talking about, there's, philosophy, interior design and philosophy go pretty hand in hand.
Yeah.
And because it is not as scientific, we go to school to learn scientifically, but there's an innate philosophy that we already have as a designer. And as I say that, you were talking about sound. They've done studies with sound and light can so change your reaction that if they could put, let me give you an example, in schools, okay? If they can use light and sound control in schools, they can change the behavior inside of a classroom. And if they can use it, okay? Now, is it the cheapest way to put lights in? No. But if you put in quality lights that have, we were talking about lights that shine up so that they're not directly down in your retinas. So there's more of an ambient light effect. You can raise the light level when you want more energy in the room. You can lower the light level when you want. Do you follow what I'm saying? You can use it to react, to have, they've done studies on it. It's cost, there's a cost to it. So unfortunately, that's the other piece of it, is most people say, oh, I can't afford it. I can't afford to have good design. I can't afford to have something. It's kind of, in my opinion, it's
you can't afford not to have.
Can't afford not. Your budget. I mean, basically, it's costing you money if you don't have good design.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's very hard to quantify, but it's just like it's hard to quantify when you put on a new suit and you walk in, you're going out to dinner. We talk a lot about, hey, you're going out to dinner. You think about how you dress, you put on a new suit, and you have a different air about you. You feel differently. And that's the confidence. That's really hard to
Well, how
put
do you measure
dollars to
confidence?
it.
You can't,
Yeah.
right? But you
Yeah.
can feel it, which is why I think it's
Sure.
within the realm of philosophy still, which is there's an entire branch of philosophy known as aesthetics. It's a huge discipline or subset of the discipline of philosophy. But you're right. Like you can't, how do you measure how a woman feels on her wedding day when she looks the best she's ever looked in her entire life in her dress? I don't know if they're like what an MRI, an EKG, like you can't measure that. You can observe the change in behavior, never mind the fact that causality, which you could argue doesn't even exist. There's another philosophical rant that I'll avoid. But it's certainly, maybe it's not seen quantifiably directly as a correlate producing, or the causal chain, let's say, but it's certainly, you can feel it. I know, like you said, if I'm in a strong suit and I'm buttoned up and my hair's, for the first time in my life, my hair looks good, and the widow's peak is hidden and nobody can see my widow's peak, and I go into a club, I feel like a king. Where if I go in my gym shorts and it's a Hillstone or whatever steakhouse, I feel like a peasant. Even if I'm wearing $200, gym shoes, I'll still feel like a peasant because I don't look congruent to the identity that I have identified myself with as, ABC. So there's that disjoint, which produces that psychological, what would that phenomenon be? It's like this discombobulated, what's the term? It's to liken it to this, it would be your brand adjective, or the emotion that you want your brand to evoke would be confidence, but yet your lighting is such that you make your customers feel as if they're in an FBI interrogation room.
That's an
They're not feeling
extreme, but
confident.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure, but it illustrates the point no less.
Yes. Yes.
And
And
wow.
it's interesting. Even you have a lot of massage people on this. So I've gone for years before I moved to a membership kind of spa place, which has been great. It's been wonderful. My maintenance of spa, I believe in massage on a maintenance level. And anyway, I moved and I haven't been able to find that same level as I go around at all. But I wish that I could go to a nice spa near the perimeter, but I pay twice as much money every time I go. But when I walk in, there's a twice as much value perceived just by the space. And
Right.
It's subtle things. It's the lighting, it's the sound quality, it's the size of the room. I don't feel like I'm in a room that massage therapist can barely move around the table. I mean, just so they could get a third room into the space, or sixth room. It's just little subtleties of that. But then you have to weigh it out. I've been for years to one of the membership type massage therapy, but I would pay more money. I did pay more money in more of a day spa type atmosphere, and I gladly paid it because of that. So I'm not, you have to know where your business model is what I'm trying to say. And you have to design to that business model. So, and you have to design it in a way that makes people feel value. I'm going to give you an example of something. My husband and I years ago went on a cruise, and if you know anything about cruises, they always have really nice spas, and you go there, and that's part of what you do when you go on the cruise. At least we do. Not that we go on cruises a lot, but when we do. We went to get a couples massage. They had placed the spa in this ship directly below a deck area that was the deck area was the kids' playground. The entire time we were in this beautiful spa with lighting and the essence of smells and all of those things, there was this banging that sounded like somebody hitting aluminum. And we asked him, what is that? You couldn't relax. What is that? Oh, that's the kids upstairs. So we went through this entire spa. We never relaxed. We never could they did give us half of our money back. Which I was not, because I was ready to get up right then, because I was like, this is horrible. So it's that this huge newer, I don't even remember what the liner was, but it was new. And why had they done that? Why had no one thought of that? And I think about people that try to put massage, a loving massage, they try to put a massage someplace, but if they don't control the sound, they lose the whole energy that's created in that space. You follow me?
Even the volume. I've walked out of massages where the volume was just, it was too loud and the music was like high paced. What the hell?
Yes.
No,
Yes.
doesn't make any sense. It's disjointed. The effect that therapist wanted to have on me was not conjoined. It was a square peg in a round hole phenomenon.
Yes.
And it made for, I don't know what the term
disconnection.
is.
It's just
Yeah.
your brain's disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a psychological, right? Exactly.
And you don't want to go back.
No, and I didn't.
You don't want to go back. So, and you
No.
don't. Yeah. So that keeps your patience and things of that sort. Definitely. And
There's also something about perception management here too, I think.
okay.
I'm thinking of when I interviewed Nigel Franklin ages ago. He's the spa whisperer and has worked with the Hyatt. He's a massage therapist. He's a spa whisperer. And one of the things that he has his therapist do before every massage is, again, thinking about perception. Now, this is in a seemingly different domain, but I think it's related.
Okay.
And what he has his therapist do is before every massage, he will have them sit down on the table next to the person and ask them, whatever, how's your body feeling, whatever. But the action of the therapist sitting controls the perception the customer has of the therapist as being equal on the same level versus the customer sitting down and the therapist is towering down over them, beside them, whatever, which evokes this sort of subtle, I'm better than you perception, even though it's not subconscious necessarily. And the therapist doesn't intend to be construed as such, but that's the perception that you expose yourself to the potentiality of the customer feeling. And if you're not cognizant of even that little subtlety, then you expose yourself to the possibility of a bad customer experience, a bad review, etc. And these little perspectival pieces are everywhere. From another example that comes to mind, and tell me this is something that you would consider tough, I'm off base or not here, but I'm thinking about, there's got to be a spa out there somewhere in the world, or chiropractic office, whatever, where you walk in and for some damn reason, the front desk is elevated off the ground. And so the front desk staff appear to be towering over the customer, even though that front desk staff might be 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, 5 feet tall, whatever. But it feels like you're facing Goliath and you're thinking, why are they better than me? And that's the state that you put the customer in. Have you seen that? Am I off base here? Like that seems
I have
baffling.
so seen that. You do. I have so seen that. So you're talking about that eye level thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
So a seated, let me just talk some practicalities here about front desk. Okay. Because you are right on. When people walk in, what we do more and more often is that we want our front desk people to be at eye level to those people that come in, but we don't want any barriers. Okay. So the perfect height of that initial barrier is 42 inches high.
Really?
Okay? It is a comfortable writing height. So the normal human being can stand there and write at that height, 42 inches high. But if you go beyond that, it starts to get up past an area where you feel stifled, where it's like you're just your head. It's less of your body being exposed to each other. And it creates a sense of barrier instead of openness. But if you go too far down, then there's no privacy, there's no respect of that person across from it. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes you want that person to be so equal to you, you don't let there be any barrier there. So it just depends on what you're trying to do as a company. But if you think about most hotels that you go into, the concierge is standing. They're standing because you're standing there, they're standing there. So that's that same idea of being at the same level as that person. So think about that. Let me throw another psychology at you, is that the typical desk in an office. Okay. So you have a desk in an office. It's typically rectangular. You have two chairs in front of it. You have the person behind it is the person of authority. You're sitting behind that desk. There's an emotional barrier between you and that person. And you are naturally believing that person is of more authority than you. That just happens. So you want to be on purpose if that's what you want to do. Okay. If you don't want that, you can take the desk, you can curve it, and people can kind of sit around it and be in relationship with you. That's that circular balance that we were talking about. And that kind of breaks down the barrier of communication. So that goes into that idea of you get on their level and they become more approachable and more comfortable, etc., and more. But if you want to provoke, I'm super authority here, don't do that. You know, it just depends on what you're trying to do and what that goal is.
Wow. Is there anything else we haven't covered that we should share with the audience that comes to mind?
So that we've talked about form follows function. Doesn't really matter how pretty it is if it doesn't function right, if it doesn't accomplish what you need to do. This old adage of lipstick on a pig kind of concept. We've talked a little bit about first impressions. We've talked, you know, I want to talk a little bit in that first impression and that the business owner that has a space that they just need to update. Think of it as we all know about real estate and staging.
Right.
Okay. So you have a house you want to sell. You've been in it 20 years. You have somebody come in that's a stager. The very first thing they do is unclutter. That's the very first thing they do. They say, get some stuff out of here. Right. So that's kind of that idea that people, when you start to have stuff around you, you start to feel burdened down. So it's just like when we do spring cleaning in our own home, there's a lightness that comes to us. So you want to make sure you're evoking that in your office. So staging is one thing. And then the other thing is that even in the staging, they will maybe redo some art and redo some stuff, and that house will sell so much faster. Why is that? I mean, there's the psychology. It's a psychology. So we talked about that. Talk about form follows function. We talked about your first impression. We talked a lot about different thought processes of design elements and what that does to you psychologically, which we could stay on that for a couple of years probably. So I don't know, you lead me. What do you think else we need to talk about?
I guess, I mean, there's so much density to these topics. To your point, we could explore these for years.
Well, I think to me, the thing that's really important is, and this is what I teach classes to students. And it's like, you don't have to be an expert at this. That's not what the job is. The job is, or that's not my job. My job is not to teach you all the things to be an expert. My job is to make you aware so that you're an educated consumer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that you're aware of this is important. And when you expand that awareness that this is important, then as you're looking at all the different things as you grow your business, that this is one of the elements that must be considered as you grow your business. Just like your front desk person, that's key. Do you know that front desk person is key? That's part of the initial customer experience, but it's all part of that customer experience. And the touch, where they touch and what they feel and everything that they do is all experience. Does that help?
Listeners, shape your environment, or your environment will shape you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to give you space to describe your perfect client, because to me, this interior design is in the same category as accounting, web development, or these other domains where you probably shouldn't go try and play with fire yourself because you might get burnt, because it's, for example, therapists, estheticians, like, I'm sorry, you're not interior designers, more than likely. You probably need to outsource this, is my gut feel. So if you want to DIY it, try it yourself, great, do that. More power to you. Hopefully it works out. But certainly those that are maybe realizing, wow, this is dense, I probably need some help. Who is your perfect client? And then how can they find you?
Our perfect client tends to be someone has already developed the foundation of their business. I'm only saying that because when you're starting out, money is so tight, you try to do most everything yourself. You tend to have more time than you do money. And so you try to find ways to work to do that. So that is the one that I would say will take some time to do your DIY class, take some time to do some stuff on your own. We've got a ton of resources on our website that, as we started this whole business that we do, we started by teaching before we ever started focusing on the chiropractic and holistic practitioner, et cetera. So that's what I would say. So our most ideal client, you asked me that question, is someone that's kind of gotten past that, and now they have a little bit of money, and now they're maybe moving to their second location. They've gotten past the everything is tight place.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that because interior design is quote unquote a luxury, but I'm saying it as with anything, you get to a point where my time is more valuable spent being the practitioner or doing the marketing or playing in my zone of genius over here than it is for me to go try to learn to do this over here, this interior design.
Yeah. And
especially with interior design or architect, and we also do architecture and interior design, the whole architecture, not just most people think of interior design as the luxury of the decorator. In commercial, it's not a luxury. It's part of helping you build a website. It's part of that whole thing. So I'm going to equate it to websites. When you start out, you can build your own website. You can get your own website kit and build your own website, right? But when you grow, you begin to understand there's a lot of nuances and things. And do I want to keep learning everything I need to learn to manage that website? Or do I want to find someone else to do that for me? And that's where it is. And once again, specifically in interior design, you're only going to move every 7 years, 7 to 10 years. This is not even going to be an issue for you, but every 7 to 10 years. It's not an ongoing thing you're going to do. It's an event that when it's over, it's over. And so that's really more our ideal client. Did I answer that I didn't answer that very quickly, did I at all?
No, the more description, the better.
Circle there.
Yeah. I mean, certainly you're not right for everybody, but you're certainly right for somebody.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to know when you're ready for help. Of course, when you're starting a new practice, launching a new venture, you have to bootstrap a lot and do a lot yourself. The problem with that, though, is that you invariably will run into walls where you have you find yourself trying to climb over the fence that is the boundary that is your circle of competency.
Yes.
And I learned that myself. I went through a software boot camp and dropped out halfway through because I realized, wow, I am not a software engineer. I do not want to become one. This was a mistake. Let me get out. And now if I need to build a site, I'll just pay someone to do it because they're the experts in that domain. And when you start to conjoin circles of competency, I don't think it's a linear relationship. It creates exponential betterment for an organization, an entity, a person, et cetera.
Exactly.
Which is why you hire coaches, because they're better than you and they teach you what to avoid. And so much of this is really just because you don't have the attunement or the awareness to know that, oh, wow, these colors are working against me. And it's something that you can't necessarily measure. You need that artistic eye and some of the background of color psychology or psychoacoustics and what have you to be able to discern that. You need someone, I'm thinking of someone who's in an aircraft flying at 500, or even better example, I somehow on YouTube this morning, I came across a video from Holloman Air Force Base of a sled at the test center on Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, where they have, they test these different hypersonic sleds. And this video shows a sled going 6,599 miles an hour on a rail track, which is insane. But imagine being on that. Once you're at that speed, you have no idea you're going that fast because you have the resonance of being contained inside of that sled. But the person that's standing next to the sled or the rail track or the track, let's say, when that thing goes by, can realize, oh my God, it's like that thing was going 6,500 miles an hour. So the point is, I think there's a need at a certain point, and it sounds like it's really those that have maybe got on their feet, they're stable, they have some discretionary funds, they're looking to elevate their practice in the aesthetic realm of their space. That's the kind of person that's probably right for, exploring ID or interior designer eyes and help and that kind of thing. So that's very helpful.
Let me speak this a second to you. So when we want to serve all of the realm all the way through, right? The startups all the way through. The challenge is that they need to believe they need the help. Does that make sense where I'm coming? Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that our ideal client already knows they need help. So it could be a startup. Do you follow me? Yeah. But our ideal client doesn't have to be convinced that this is important. They already know the space is important, and they realize that they understand that a quality environment is going to elevate their success. Where we come in is we help them get that accomplished, because there's a lot of complexity to get that done. We say there's like 6,000 decisions that have to be made if you're opening a new office, just in the built environment. That's not counting hiring people or your website or any of those things. 6,000 decisions that need to be made. And so hiring someone that understands that can save you time, energy, money, all of those type of things. So that's our ideal client. Does that make sense? The one that really needs to know that. Once again, it's not the luxury. Do you understand what I'm saying? It's not really a luxury. And that's where we challenge, that's where we're challenged, is that it's not a luxury. You need this. You've got to get a set of permit drawings anyway. You might as well do it right. Do you know what I'm saying? As opposed to just
fair enough. Don't wing it. Don't wing it. I agree.
Yeah. So does that help? So,
it does.
But we work through steps. We develop 6 steps to take you through the process. And do we just talk about those real quick and just
that'll be a good note to land the plane on, so to speak, here. So let's do that.
Okay, so the first step is, we call it discover, and that is very much about, what do I need square footage wise? So you're starting a practice, you're starting a business, you're starting a clinic. What do I really need square footage wise? And that comes from a progressively, what do I want to accomplish in this space? What are the modalities? What are the services? What are the techniques? What are the equipment? What am I trying to do in the space? All of those things come into play. And how much space do each one of those need? How do they need to be served? All of those type of things. So that comes up with we literally do a spreadsheet to come up with square footage. Okay. Little vignettes of each one of the spaces on a spreadsheet. And then the other part of that is, what is the image I want to have? And I alluded earlier, actually said earlier, is images. We have people create, basically, you said a vision board, but inspiration photos of spaces that represent what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
When we suggest you do that before you ever go look for space, because then you are really clear on, hey, I want 2,000 square feet because this is what I need to make my business function. And aesthetically, I want it to be this. So I need to make sure that the curb appeal that I can't really change is going to mesh with what I want on the inside. Does that make sense to you? You've got your vision that's going together. So that's step one. Then step two is after you've gone to look for space, you need to figure out if you're going to fit in the space. How, because every space is different. Every 2,000 square foot space are different. So that's where we do we call it explore, and we really look at all the different ways you can flow. So that's where we get into the form, into the function. How do we lay it out? How is it going to flow the best? Where, what is that perception when people walk in? All of those types of concepts. And we end up with a space plan that can be generally priced. So we suggest you do that before you ever go lease a space, before you actually sign for the lease, where you're in that due diligence period. Because then you'll know how much, you'll know, one, are you going to fit? And two, what could this cost to build it out? Then the third step is after you've signed the lease, we actually design the construction drawings, the architectural drawings, which have to do with the ceiling and the lighting and all of the three-dimensional elements of the space. And then our fourth step is what you think more of traditional interior design. That's where we get into the coloring, picking the finishes, picking the furniture, all of those types of things. Then step number 5 is where we take that together and we get engineering drawings so that could become a permit, because you have to have a certain thing. You have to have an engineer be involved in your lighting, an engineer be involved in your heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, and engineers involved in any plumbing. So all of those go together in our step 5, and that's the permit package. And then our step 6 is where that a contractor has been selected. We can help, we become counsel, et cetera, all the way through that process. And that we help, we call it design assurance. So that's where we make sure that that design, we're the answer. We kind of answer the questions for you as you go through. So that's our process that we go through when somebody's building out a new space. Those steps are similar if somebody's renovating. They're just not as much, there's not as much quantity of time needed when you're just renovating, if you follow me. But we still process through it. What do you really need? What's your image? What are you trying to do? What are the options that we have here? How do we explore? Then once we decide on that, then we start to build the documents to actually get it from design. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Love that. Lots to think about. An infinitely dense topic that we could spend a lifetime exploring. And I think, to me, if you try to DIY it, again, it seems like you're playing with fire, because there's a lot of ways to get it wrong, very few ways to get it right. So this has been helpful. This has been very, very interesting. And I appreciate your taking the time to share all this with us. So
you're welcome.
As a closing note, how can the listeners, or what is the best way for them to connect with you?
So our company's name is Crossfields, Crossfields. Our website you can find us through crossfields.com or crossfieldsincorporated.com, or you can find us through chiropracticofficedesign.com, which is our tagline that became our identity, if you might say. So chiropracticofficedesign.com/beauty, and you can come to a landing page specifically for the podcast listeners where you can do one click and download all of our free resources. So we've got free floor plans. We've got that 5 designer checklist I was talking about for the existing client. We've got a 5-point checklist, another 5-point checklist that you go through for building and all, like if you're starting out in practice, all the things that you have to get involved with and the timeline that's involved. And then we have the initial, what we started out with was the 5 biggest mistakes chiropractors make when they open their office. So focused on what are the big things. So that you can do that. And then also there's a discount code. We do have 2 online products for the do-it-yourselfers. We have 100 floor plans you can purchase of all different types of spaces. And then we also have what we call our decorator package. We call it Design for You, where we literally go into each one of we take one space and we designed it according to what your image that you want to have is. And then that's all put together with finishes and a box of samples and all types of things. So that was created specifically for the do-it-yourselfer that just wanted to buy a package all designed.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
A lot of resources,
resources, absolutely. And then if they're interested, they can do that. And they can also go on, we do a complimentary consultation, and it's about an hour to just talk about what you're trying to accomplish and give you advice and take you through the process.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Well, speaking of lovely, this has been a lovely time, and I'm grateful for the time you've spent here with us today. I appreciate it immensely. And yeah, wow, lot to think about. I'm sitting here, standing technically, and reevaluating my own space due to you. So thanks for the ideation. It's been a lot of fun. So I think it's a good place to park the combo for today. So we'll get back to our work. And again, thank you for being on today.
Yes, enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.